there are things that are now available to make life easier, instead of just insisting on certain things that do not necessarily contribute at the end of the day to making our lives easier, but instead literally enslave us to our traditions, enslave us to our customs. And yet, if you tweak it the other way around, you can actually pick up those African ways of life, like community, you know, the meetings that we have as families, the get-togethers, sharing food, checking on one another. You know, there are many good things that we could continue to encourage, while there are others that, you know, we are not necessary anymore for us to do. Yeah.
And I think you really talk about this in your chapter 5, which is learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Mm,
So, for those listening to us, there's more in the book about this perspective of, how do we balance our Africanism versus
yeah.
the
Yeah.
globalization that is happening. I mean, globalization is here and it's not going to go away. It's just going to
Yes.
become bigger and bigger. So
Yeah.
that actually brings
I
me
mean,
to
that's
another.
true. Yeah, just to chip in very briefly, look at
Mm,
what lockdown has done. Lockdown has made students of both the lecturers and their students. So we are all learning how to teach online. You know, we are all learning how to use Zoom. You know, how do we conduct an authentic examination,
exam.
you know, online? You know, I mean, I guess some universities and some institutions, like the ones that provide for international courses like SCCA and so on, ICSA, have been able to find a way out. But
Yes,
suddenly
they have
everybody now is being required to
to
go
do the
online,
same.
teach online, conduct exams online. And some of our universities honestly are struggling, and others are trying to make certain strides. So yeah.
Mm. Well, I guess also globalization is not only good. I mean, the pandemic is because of globalization,
Yeah. Yes, yes. That
unfortunately.
is true. That is,
Well,
I mean, Uganda had managed in the first round, before the first in the first wave of the virus. Uganda had managed to control it until we made, I don't know whether it was a mistake or not, of opening up the air spaces. And once you had people traveling from certain parts of the country, they brought the virus. Before we know it, the virus is kicking off at very high speeds.
yeah.
So if we had locked down and locked our airports much longer, maybe we would not be where we are right now. Even the
Mm,
second variant that we talk about, either I call it Delta or the Indian
Delta.
variant, we didn't have it, you know. And but you know, air travel, at least the information we have is that it wasn't with us, um,
Until,
until people had to
yeah.
travel and carry it with them, you know. And if you have weak systems that cannot do the checks and balances very well, then you are bound to have the kind of challenges that you have of
Right.
uh,
That
having
is true.
them, you know. Yeah,
Mm. Well, in the aspect of globalization, in the aspect of learning and relearning, you also talk about, studying abroad. Of course, you did your master's uh, from University of Cambridge and your doctorate from University of Kent. And in the book, you talk about how studying in a different environment really changed your perspective of what the classroom looks like, or what the classroom should be like. What are some of these things that really stood
even
out
it,
for
it
you?
even changed, yeah, it even changed the perspective of who a lecturer is, and what they, I mean, when I was in Cambridge, you know, Cambridge is arguably the best university in the world, or at
Mm,
least amongst the top three, depending on the ranking you're looking at. And we
yes.
had all kinds of lecturers, you know. Some walk to the exam, I mean, walk to the lecture room. Some ride on bicycles, you know, to the lecture room. And of course, there are some who drive the Bentley and the other high class vehicles. But what came through for me was, you know, this pomp that is associated with being a lecturer, and in some cases, because I am a lawyer within our legal fraternity, the pomp associated with, lawyers must exude wealth and
Yes.
and greatness and be very
You
aloof,
are a class ahead of the rest of
a
the
class
human
apart.
species.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Suddenly, you are in a space where someone is very accomplished and yet they are able to ride a bicycle to and from their home. And I remember when I came back, I was so, so humbled, really, really humbled. I mean, in at that time, we had this craze amongst the lawyers in Uganda, especially we young folks, where everyone needs to drive a
Benz.
German-made Mercedes Benz,
I
and
remember.
and if you think about it, many lawyers, the more you mature, the more you discard the Benz for a more practical car. But before that, everyone, I must drive a Benz, must drive a Benz. And yet there is one or two of your lecturers who are driving far simpler vehicles. And you're like, what's wrong with this guy? Doesn't he have enough money? And so on and so forth. Uh, yeah, but you go to Cambridge, you get exposed. Everyone, your fellow students are all riding bicycles. All of us are taking the train. The transport system kind of equalizes us. And that really was some of the lessons that told me, look, man, calm down. There is no need to please the Jones or to hang out with the Kardashians to feel like you have arrived. You can make it any way you want. I would meet retirees who are volunteering in a charity shop, and these are loaded people who will travel on for holiday in whichever part of the country they want, and then they dress simply, and I realize these are lessons that we need to teach our students, our fellow students, our younger folks. We need to tell them to keep calm, man. It's okay for you to walk. It's okay for you to go to the garden and plant some vegetables. After all, you need these vegetables for your health and wealth. Um, those are some of the. I'm sorry I interrupted you before you finished your question, but I thought it was very interesting for me to interject and but yeah, go ahead. What was the last part of your question?
Actually,
And
that you're answering most of it. Like, how did this change your perspective of not just the classroom, but
yeah,
how we should, like, what Uganda perceives, or what maybe Africans perceive as having arrived, or something like that. Because
yes,
most of these things are taught to us. You either they are told to
yeah,
you directly, or you see you're like, but when I become a certain person, I want to be like that lady.
yeah,
I want to be like that guy. They're
yeah,
dressed in a certain way. They're driving a certain car.
yeah,
They are living in a certain neighborhood. But when you go
yeah,
abroad, this
yeah,
bubble is burst. So,
yeah,
how did
yeah,
studying abroad change your perspective? You've already covered most
yeah.
of it.
Yeah, I'll just give you, allow me share three scenarios.
Yes.
First of all, I apologize to the Lord. I should have said this first. I'm a Christian, as you know. I'm a born again believer in the Lord, and one of the things that has come out for me is that God, for in the kingdom of the Lord, success is not how much wealth you have, but
Mm,
how you bless others. Your wealth is viewed in the people you have influenced for the better. That's why in my chapter 1 of the book, we don't teach that at university. I take a lot of time to talk about people just getting to understand who they are, and what their purpose in life is. And I quote at some point Mark Twain, who says the most important days in the life of a man are the day he's born, the man is born, and the day he gets to know why. So what's your vision, your purpose? What are your value systems? And then, as sharing with some young people the other day, that you must have a true north that guides what you do. And for me, my true north is God. And so being able to go into, to take graduate study abroad and to see the import of religion on society, like England is where it is today because of how practical Christian living just infused in education systems, infused in the work life, infused in everything they do. And then to be able to see what distancing from religion and God has now brought in, where now churches are being used as either they're being sold off to people who want to start mosques, exhibition centers, and so on and so forth, and the struggles that they're having with reality. And I mean, that's a huge discussion altogether, I know, but that just comes to my mind to see how, if you aim for a higher calling that is beyond just the acquisition of money and power, and position. Yeah. So it's not that money and power is not important, but there must be something much more. And you see, South Africa gives us an example, as we have
Very
this
true.
conversation. South Africa shows us that without money, I mean, without pushing to have some kind of equality for all,
Equality,
to lives better for everybody, and
everyone.
not just get richer and richer as others become poorer and poorer. That lacuna there in it is going to blow up at one point in time. It will be a French Revolution kind of story, uh, at one point in time, because people will get tired and say, we are going to burn down the city, and yet if there are more practical ways put in place to help the very poor achieve at least most of the basic resources, access to heating. South Africa gets chilly quite a bit. Access to good
Mm,
housing, access to meaningful jobs, and a better way of life. Then you begin to, then there you are actually addressing the core issues when you make, as someone suggested, people own. You help people own what they see, and not feel like it belongs to others, and we are not a
yeah.
part to it. Yeah. So those that exposure really is very helpful for me, and it did help me to see that it's not enough for you to have a degree. It's not enough for you to go to get a good university education. There is much more that is required of you after you have received that education. Yeah.
Education. I completely agree with you because personally, the things I've had to learn, unlearn, relearn with my experience, having studied in Japan, and I think you alluded a bit to it when you talked about religion and development. Well, Japan is not religious as Africans. We define religion. However, their Shinto beliefs, their Buddhist beliefs are all ingrained in their education system, in their way of life. They truly live their beliefs, you know. You don't have to find someone at the corner of the road telling you about what you have to do and what you don't have to do. Those things have already been, set. Slowly they've infiltrated everywhere. And I think that is something important because perhaps when students go abroad to study, they tend to focus so much on, I need to get this degree, I need to get this degree. But perhaps when people get the opportunity to go abroad to study, they should also do the studying that's not done in the university. Looking around your environment. How is this community? How do they relate? How is it different from me? What is their thought process? Why is A like this? Why is it that the common sense back home is not the common sense here? So these things you can only learn them outside the university setting, because I believe most of the times universities are very, should I say, controlled environments, some sort of a
Mm, mm,
bubble. Everything
mm,
is softer. I would say
mm,
everything is
mm,
softer. You probably will not see, like, for example, the first time I saw a homeless person in Tokyo, I was like, there's homeless people, you know but there is a few homeless people. When you go out and talk to people, you see there are people who may not have jobs and all these things.
mm,
You see,
mm.
there's also the other flip side. There's the good and the bad, but there's also the ugly. So perhaps also things that as you said, it's not just getting that degree. Also trying to see life through the eyes of you the people who are hosting you in their country. Yes, so
Yes,
thank you
yes,
for
yes.
putting that out there.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah.
Well, the other thing is
No, I'll
perhaps.
give you a small scenario of a story that my wife shared of a man in their village, very rich man, had lots of cows and food, and so whenever there was a burial or a wedding in the area, he would just contribute and say, "Oh, these guys need meat. I'll give them a bowl. I don't need to be there. Oh, these guys need
Wow.
food. I know they like to eat. I'll send them some plantain, some matoke, and some, rice. I don't need to be there. They are, after all, lowly people." And so a time
Mm.
comes when he has to marry off one of his daughters, and he invites everybody and he slaughters, quite maybe two bulls, saying, "I know these people like to eat," and so on. And literally, the only people who came to his wedding, I mean, to that wedding, his daughter's
The
traditional
wedding.
wedding, was probably his brother-in-law and one or two relatives, and the village had mobilized to say no one is going to go there. you
Oh
you
my
you
God.
you street boys who like eating food, we are going to contribute, and we will kill two goats for you to eat alone, but we are not going to allow you to go for that man's wedding, uh, daughter's wedding. We need to teach him a lesson that human beings are very important. We need you more than your money. We need you more than your contribution. We need you more than the meat you're sending us. And you know, the man was really embarrassed because he had taken human beings for granted. He had taken and of course the in-laws were quite doubtful. Who is this kind of individual who the villagers also shun? And we are, what kind of daughter has
Married
he
into
raised,
this family. Mm.
why should we get married to somebody from this man's family? And the story goes that, having learned his lesson, whenever there's a marriage in the village, he is the first one. Whenever there is a barrier in the village today, he is the first. He learned his
Mm.
lesson that people need me as much as I need them. Yeah.
Yes. I completely agree.
Mm.
That is very, very true. Having that very direct human contact.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
talking about, human contact, from the book, you talk a lot about the ladies or the women in your life. You talk about Claire, your wife, and about, how she relentlessly pursued her dreams while pregnant, while nursing, the grit she showed. You talk about your mother, feeding on apples, so that she could, you know, save something to come back home early to be with you.
Yeah.
You talk
Yeah.
about your daughter, even after jumping off what is it called? A drip, she decides to
Yes.
go and do what she truly, truly loves. So
Yeah.
when I read some of these things, I was two things came to mind. First of all, the importance of the people people we surround ourselves and the choices of perhaps partners that we make, the examples
Yeah.
that we give our children, or the examples we give just the people around us, because we don't get to choose our parents, but we get
Yeah.
to choose
Yeah.
our partners. And
Yeah.
also, as maybe parents or leaders, we must be cognizant of the fact that whatever we are doing is impacting that little boy, that little girl somewhere, and one way or the other, they're picking up something. So this brings me to grit, because all these
Yeah.
stories are truly, truly about
Yeah.
grit. Someone
Yeah.
might ask, because me personally, I feel like Africans have like grit is already in us, considering,
Mm,
the environments we grow up in, the things around us. I mean, grit is within us. However, how should people exercise this grit? How do people exercise this muscle? Because it's something that we need to build. And I think this especially goes to the millennials that you alluded to earlier. There's a lot of things that have been talked about millennials. Millennials are this, millennials are that, millennials are about instant gratification, millennials are entitled.
yeah.
However, there's also very many good things that millennials bring to the table, you know. But many of the other generations feel like they don't have that grit muscle. Hmm? So how do people exercise this grit muscle? Because
Yeah.
it's important, and it's not something that is taught at the university. It's not something that is taught at home. You just find yourself in a situation, and suddenly you have to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, uh, I guess from my stories, you can tell that there's been a strong impact of
Yes.
women around me, and I gave quite a number of, even in other scenarios, I gave quite a number of examples of just seeing women being able to push themselves hard to be able to achieve certain things, and this does not mean that men don't do it.
That is true.
um yeah, the reality is that we tend to learn from the people who are closest to us, and so if men are too busy doing other things, we will not learn from them as their sons. And this is, this is with no disrespect to those men who've been able to do exceedingly well. So, like I said, this book is aimed at helping everyone, but specifically also targeting young people who want to join a university, who are at the university, and who have just come out of the university. And I
Mm,
share examples of the fact that I have seen certain people make it in life, or at least in certain aspects of life, just because they have decided not to give up. So we live in a society today whereby uh, our backbones, or some of the backbones I see of many, across so many situations. Like, I think at the beginning of this year, beginning of this month, or towards the end of last month, we lost a student at the law school at Makerere. This was a final year student who was doing an exam for the last time. It meant that if she did not pass that exam, she would be discontinued from the university. And we've had different students go through this kind of situation whereby they fail an exam 3 times and that's it, you are discontinued. So this girl, having done the exam, felt that the exam hasn't gone well for her, and so she has taken her life, and she committed suicide. And there are many other stories that we can think of students who just literally give up. Even in the workspace, when you receive
yes.
a little bit of criticism, even as lecturers, when we do not give you the marks that you thought you deserve, you complain, you quarrel, you're not used to failure, is what I want to bring out. And 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 so grit is such an important element in our life's journey that we need people to know that some of the goals we pursue are goals that call out patience in us. It's like a man dating a woman and she's keeping on saying no, but you know for sure she's the one. And so you patiently chip away at her no until you arrive at a yes. And so grit is like that. You find that determination to say, I am going to win in this situation. And I probably see it with cross country runners better than many other scenarios, or with people who climb mountains, because they are able to say, I am determined to do all I can to finally win. I was listening to a small video of Miss USA 2016. I forget her name, but this is a lady who tried almost 8 years and losing every time, until she wins finally. Now that takes grit, and many of our students are in this. Not many, but some of them are in the craze of I must do it, and do it well, and do it very well the very first time, and
And do it now,
this
now, now.
now, I want it now, and it must come out perfectly. I mean, we are in the social media age whereby you have all Snapchats and so on, and you want to present yourself with the perfect body, the perfect face, the perfect skin, where a pimple just takes you out of your day, and you're literally struggling. So grit is the kind of thing that is a necessary tool for many of us to be able to persist at something. You're paying off a loan for a house. You're not going to pay it off immediately. It is, you just have to keep focused that maybe your salary will be chopped off slowly but surely until you win. There is a guy who in India who was nicknamed the Mountain Man. The Mountain Man, true story, that I could find out for you. Who lost his wife. Uh, he lost
During
his wife.
childbirth.
Yeah, I think she was ill or something, and she could not. He's called Dashrath Manji. She couldn't access a hospital in time because she had to walk around the mountain. Um, and because of that, the story goes that she died because of an injury from a mountain. So he decided, I'm going to chip at this mountain and create a wall, create a road through it. And it took him 22 years of work, you know, to shorten the journey, which was 55 kilometers to 15 kilometers, between his village and the nearest town, So now 22 years of commitment, is that is grit, being able to say, I have a vision. I need to get this vision through. In order to do so, I must slowly chip at what I am doing until I arrive at that thing. Now, that
That is
needs
true.
patience, it needs determination, it needs grit, the ability to say, these momentary inconveniences I am going through, um, I will not allow them to distract me. And you see, at the university, what I argue is that when you join the university, at least when I joined the university, and my perspective when I was at the university in those days was that students have it all figured out. They know what they
Yeah.
want. They come in determined, they come in knowledgeable, they're already hardworking, and so on and so forth, which was not true, because slowly but surely you see more students drop off, either because they failed or they've been distracted by girlfriends,
Life.
sex, drug abuse, alcoholism, work, the making of money, politics, and so on. Keep distracting them. And then those who are there kind of lose vision at some point in the middle of their 4 year study in at least in the law school. Some consistently push through, others lose it. And so grit is very important for you to say, I must stay with this line and win through. Because when you go to the workspace, these are the very challenges you're going to face as well. And you had better be ready to persist in doing what you are doing. Yeah. Yeah.
That is very true, and it also just reminded me of we had a book club review on Friday, and one of the ladies talked about how people who, or the so-called brilliant people, find it so hard when they fail. They do not know how to fail, and it is
Mm-hmm.
also something that I think is also related to grit. You know, if you've been
Yeah.
excelling since primary school, secondary school, or maybe you're at the university and suddenly, you know, life life takes a turn. You probably failed two course units. That is your first time to ever fail. You
Yeah.
feel like my life is over. You know, I how do I face my parents? How do I face my peers? I have never failed in my life. You know,
Mm.
how how to overcome such situations, I think, is also part of grit. You know, it's not
Yeah.
just in addition,
That's true.
you know.
Yeah.
So for those
And
listening
and
to
and
us,
earlier you feel the better.
that is true. And I feel like you really articulated this in your chapter 7, in your chapter 9, and also talked about it in your chapter 8, you know, because you just talked
Mm.
about sometimes people, because the university is where many of us got our first freedom, so to
Yeah.
speak. So so there is university politics. There's, you know, probably it's your first time you're going out clubbing, happening. You've joined these all these kinds of groups, and so you're truly distracted
Mm.
by life. And I think you talk about this in your chapter 8, the one about love, sex, and family, and you know how you have
Mm.
to really control yourself. Eh? So
Yeah.
I believe
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe
Yeah.
that's
That
also
is
part
true.
of great. Hmm?
Mm. Yeah. Unfortunately, you're right. Unless you are involved in in certain organizations, certain associations. Like I was involved in the Christian Lawyers Fellowship at the law school, the Christian Law Students Fellowship,
Mm,
and then we were able to be exposed to some of the lawyers who were married, and who are married, who are working, and then they start sharing the experiences with us, and some of them give very honest answers to what they went through, and some of them, like Justice Shibita, you see that he moves around and he actually enjoys the company of his wife. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm here with my wife, or that my wife is available, but it's another thing for you to see that this couple actually are comfortable around themselves, and they kind of give you hope that I too can have a relationship with somebody, get married to them, and even in my working life, where opportunity avails itself, I can enjoy. And grit, you're right, is very key in a marriage, because these are two strangers that come together. You know, the only icing is the romance and the physical attraction, which always keeps melting away, and you need to put in more. You need to invest into more melting, more icing, on the relationship. But at the core, the hard core, you know, there are people with different characteristics and different mannerisms, and one has to determine, especially for us as men, that you wake up every day and say, this is the person I have decided to love, the person I've decided to walk the journey of life with, that regardless of what may come around, I am committed. And grit is about commitment, to say, I am here to learn all the things I had learned or known about relationships. I must be able to unlearn them. The idea that men are the leaders, treat them as kings, and so on. When you actually see it, you unpack and realize actually you're both partners. You are both partners. You need to find a way to work with each other in one way or another. And the only way this relationship is going to work is if you determine that every small day we shall make small victories. Simple victories like learning how to communicate with each other, learning how to say sorry, learning how to walk on the same pace. Like if you're on the street and you're walking, you do not walk ahead and someone is tagging along like a puppy. There are so many small things, and you could eat. And I've seen so many relationships that have basically failed because someone just does not have the patience to push it. It's like the taming of the shrew. I don't know if you've read that poem
I
by
know
that
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 title, but I haven't
yes.
read it.
Yeah. So taming of the shrew is this very unruly girl who needs to be married off. Every man
Mm-hmm.
in the area wants to marry the second born because she is more cordial, she's more easy to work with. But the father said, until my eldest daughter is married, no one is going to marry my second born. And so it
Wow.
takes some guy with crazy ideas to come and not only marry the first daughter, but also tame her, to become the kind of wife and that takes patience, it takes tact, it takes a lot of, you know, um, a lot of shrewdness to be able to accomplish that task. And so, even with relationships, there's a lot of, I totally agree, there's a lot of grit that is required, a lot of patience that is required, and a lot of innovative thinking that is needed because speaking as a man, they say women are simple, but really they are not. I don't know what you think on whether you're simple or not, but
Me, I think the guys are
the
simpler.
I think we are much simpler. I think we are able to think more in straight lines than most than the ladies, And I mean, 1+1 is 2 for us, but for you, 1+1 could be 3. It could be 2. It could be 21, depending on the circumstances, and
It
so on
could
and
be
so
one
forth.
and a half.
And 0.5, so but regardless of what it could be at that time, I think grit is the ability to be able to say that regardless the challenges and circumstances that our relationship may be going through, there is no excuse
Mm.
that is so strong enough for me to say I am leaving this relationship. You know that there's no excuse. I mean, unless someone runs and disappears and you no longer see them, or they are dead. But grit is being able to say, I have committed to love somebody and I'll do all I can to do so. Of course, it's made much easier when there is a willingness on the other party.
That's right.
Uh, but what is your mindset as the individual? Are you also ready to, or you're not? And so much as I don't explore it a lot in the book, uh, my intention and the subsequent conversations I've had in the manhood versus maleness conversations with the students is just to help them understand and appreciate the differences they have, and the fact that marriage, sex, family call at the core for responsibility, with or without your degree, whether it's a law
Yeah.
degree or engineering degree. At the end of the day, you will not learn uh, at the university how to become a good father.
Yep.
Those lessons, you're going to pick them elsewhere. You'll not learn how to become a good mother. It's not on the syllabus for the law course. You'll not learn how to be a good husband, a good
Yeah.
son-in-law. And yet these are such relevant lessons that are needed for somebody to have holistic success in life.
That is true.
Yeah.
Holistic. Holistic being the key word, really.
Yeah.
Because if the scale is tilted to one end, then there's problems, you know. So
Yeah.
truly, the book we don't teach that at the university for me uh, was really like it was simple, it was powerful, and it left a lot of room of conversation in that you were not so much telling people, yo, this is what it should be, this is what it should be, but rather, have you thought about this? You know, have you thought
Mm,
about this perspective? Do you know about this? You know, so for me, it was a really powerful book, and I was really excited by the time I finished reading it. I felt like, yeah, this should be in shelves in every level of institution, every education level, in every home, you know, because it's
mm,
very, very
mm.
powerful. And you also talk about the fact that, you know,
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
we are truly in a VUCA period. You know, I mean, the
Yes.
pandemic, if we have been waiting for any kind of VUCA to happen in our lives, this is it. The pandemic
Yeah.
has truly shown us life can be volatile, it can be
Yeah.
uncertain, it can be
Yeah.
complex, it can be ambiguous. There is no white and black, there is no right or wrong. We're just,
Mm.
for lack of a better word, what is that? What's the famous one? State of Quagmire.
Yeah. You know well, there are some blacks and whites in my view. For example,
Mm,
I believe the only constant thing in this season that is not going to change is change.
it's
Like
strange.
the only constant thing is going to be change. So uh, look, right now we are able to have this conversation because certain things have fundamentally changed.
Yes.
Communication can be done. No one needs to buy airtime anymore, really, to make a phone call to someone in a different continent. Like, it's not necessary.
Mm,
But you can have airtime that you can convert into data bundles, and
data.
you live and speak for, like we have done, for much longer than you would have if it was, what I used to go through when I was calling my wife when I was in England. And you talk for an
Mm,
hour and your airtime is finished and you cannot talk anymore. So that has changed dramatically. And so I agree with you that and when you bring it out, you can see the first industrial revolution, second industrial revolution, steam engine, third, fourth. Now we are talking cryptocurrencies, we are talking, different payment mechanisms, and like,
yeah.
what is going on. And so our default position should be uh the default position of change.
Mm,
The first time we bought a piece of land, my wife and I, my so excited. This is my first piece of land to purchase. I need to build my house, I need to do all. And my wife's default position was like, if we get a good price for it, let's sell. And I'm like, what? We can't sell this piece of land. This is ours. Finally,
it's
we
our
have. And she said,
baby.
no, this is our baby, and there's all these sentimental attachments to it. And she's like, if we get a good price, my view is, let's sell. And indeed, I mean, how many years went by? it wasn't long after that, 5, 6 years, we were already selling it off. And so the default position for most of us is going to be change,
Person change.
change, change. So, and we need to have to ask ourselves those questions. Look, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to do in life, and must you do it where you are? Can't you do it otherwise? Look at politics. Must I call myself a politician because I love politics and I'm passionate about what happens in my nation and the leadership questions of the day, the policy matters we discussed earlier? And but the question was, must I become a member of politics or a member of parliament in order to participate in politics? Or there are other avenues, cheaper, less stressful avenues where I can participate in politics without necessarily having to sell my house, get indebted into loans, fight at the ballot boxes, and so on and so forth.
Mm,
So, what is our mindset for change? So, I guess we need to know that change had better be our default position.
default.
I belong to a church that is always changing and we are always doing catch up. Today they are saying we shall organize ourselves in cell groups. The next thing, no, we are going to become missional communities. The next thing, the changes have to occur. And if our church was not change minded, when the first round of the lockdown happened, we would not have been ready to have online church services taking place. But good
Mm,
enough, the thing had already begun. So by the time we had this lockdown, there were already services happening. The church had already started building a muscle. So while other churches were probably struggling to do online and look for, I don't know, where do we get studios, where do we do this, our church had kind of been, kind of ready, and so
okay.
lockdown or not no lockdown, certain things
Life
were
must go
already
on.
happening. So I think this book is very strong on that as well, that the world is volatile. COVID-19 is not the last thing that is going to affect us fundamentally. We should be ready. I mean, you and I know we come from a country that has had a lot of changes in government and political upheavals, one coup d'etat over another, one political system over another. At one point, you're seeing a single political party organization arrangement. The next thing, it's multi-party, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so we need to have that attitude, and I know that
Mm,
right now our students are struggling, and we too are struggling in many of these universities, but there is nothing we can do. We must change. We can't run away from it anymore. You're either going to study online or you're not going to study. So make up your mind. Otherwise, the lockdown is still with us. So you find yourself having
unfortunately.
to frog jump or frog leap into a new way of doing things, and what I know is that this kind of way of doing things is not going to change. I see us not going back into the way things were done before. I
Entirely.
mean, our Rotary Club, for example, I'm a Rotarian, I belong to a Rotary Club. We are meeting online. Our meetings have never stopped. We are meeting online. We are not waiting for things to open up before we do so. We are meeting online. So yeah, those are the realities that we
Thank you
have.
so much for those parting shots. That is a real powerful one. Change has to change, and we must change with it. Really,
Mm,
we must change with it. So, for me on my end, this was really, you know, very insightful and very exciting. And yeah, I'm really just grateful for you having taken off your time to discuss with us and to, give us a little bit more of yourself You did that in the book, but you've also given us a bit more of yourself here today. So thank you so much. And we'll be leaving how where you can find the book in the comment sections. So everyone should get it. It's actually very affordable.
Yes.
35,000,
Yes.
right? We'll leave the information. We'll leave the information
Yes.
at the end of this. So, Dr. Daniel Ruhweza, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a good thing to talk about these issues, and be reminded that they remain pertinent
Yeah.
issues for our people, our generation, our parents,
Yes.
our
Yes.
our
Yes.
children.
Thank you
Yeah.
so
So
much.
yeah, thank you for your time.